Thank you so much, everyone, for coming for the talk in such a beautiful afternoon instead of going to the pool. So I think after this talk, I'm going to the pool myself. So thank you for being here. Yeah.
Yes, just reiterating my thanks to all of you for coming out. I know I see many people who were here last night, and what an incredible celebration. So really appreciate you coming back 2 days in a row. So Jiab, I thought maybe we could start with your backstory and also the title of the show. So I think actually that's a good place to start. Is the title of the exhibition is called Sweet Solitude. Can you tell us a little bit about what that sentiment is, and then we'll go back over your story.
So I grew up in a small town in Thailand. It's a kind of town that everything moved very slowly, and the most exciting thing I had when I was a child is going around the corner, the bookstore corner, buying a manga and read it in my bedroom, and I have that kind of life until 18 years old. And when I moved to Bangkok, and then moved to London, Berlin, and such, I just realized that slowly my life get to the routine and become this kind of life that very close to what I had when I was a child. But then it's not in the context that it's that comfortable, because I live outside of my country, and sometimes you have a bit of nostalgia and solitude came up, and this title, Sweet Solitude, is just like a sort of realization and the self-construction in a way that when you have this sort of solitude, how can you cope with that kind of time all by yourself, and how can you make it positive and productive? And so the work itself, all my artwork is that, like, it's a constructive of self, and try to make that, good time, bad time, good memory, and digest it, shatter it, and reconstruct it again on the canvas.
And one of the things that you've said, Jiab, is that you use painting as a way to better understand yourself. And I really love that sentiment. So today we're going to give you a bit of a walkthrough of the exhibition, which is in some ways also a walkthrough of Jiab's almost story as an artist.
Personal life.
Yeah, and also some of the themes in your work. So the exhibition is organized in 5 sections. And the first thing that you see when you walk in the exhibition is the painting Purpose. And so I first became aware of Jiab's work in 2020 when she won the British Portraiture Prize at the National Gallery. And I'd been following her work since then. And up until that point, Jiab was pretty much working in obscurity. And one of the things that I find really inspiring about Jiab's work is that she's a completely self-taught artist. And so I think there's a lot of inspiration for everyone in this room about your own self-determination of what you want to be and how you make that happen for yourself. Because Jiab is someone who did that as a person, right?
I made it.
You lived your dream, which
I'm
I think,
legit.
whatever your dream is, and I find that very inspiring.
Yeah.
And so Purpose, the way I understand it, is this moment when you were starting to get recognition and people were starting to see you differently, and you wanted to look in the mirror and see yourself. And also all the books that you see, if you go to Jiab's house, it's full of all of these artist books, and you've learned by looking at other artists.
And there is your book. Yeah, Alex came, and then there was Alex's book on our shelf. Just like randomly like
There's
that.
a lot of coincidences in our relationship.
It's wonderful.
But you also were talking about this, the importance of this image for you is about a way to reposition the way that you see yourself, but also making sure that you're bringing all of those reference points with you, that it's not just you breaking out on your own, but it's all of those things that you carry with you as an artist.
Yeah, certainly. Like when you see the book behind that painting, it's like awe of, you can read backward or of the name of the artist that I've been so inspired from. And I felt like my type of work and the body of work itself is really legit and easy to understood because of the work that, the old master and other artists has been done before. And also the life philosophy of like certain artists that I follow. Like I got really inspired and got really kind of like encouraged when I saw the talk of Curry James Marshall, and he was talking about the year that he himself as an artist and how he used to like stay at the YMCA. Is that YMCA? He stayed just like, you know, like very cheaply and tried to just work in the film crews, saving all his money from the year just to work on his painting. And that's a kind of like, you know, philosophy of life and the purpose that I feel like I want to apply for myself, and I want to have that dream set up, and then I will do everything, and I will do everything I could to move forwards and to arrive to that point. And I think it was a kind of mantra, kind of the painting itself demonstrates the mantra of myself as an artist, that if you want to be something, you need to have purpose and you have to move forward and you have to arrive to that point. And it's only you who can do that for yourself, not others.
So I've advanced to the next slide, Jiab, and I want to talk about some of the things that you reference in your work. And the one of the things that drew me to your work was the way that you work with photography and film. And there's a way that you work with the kind of patina materiality of the analog image. And so we have this image, Love from Three Continents, and it's a painting of a photograph of your parents. Could you say a little bit about this? Because I think it's important to kind of dwell on these early works in the first gallery to set the stage for your practice.
Love from Three Continents, NKP stand for Nakhon Phanom, is my hometown. When I make a picture, I want to retrieve the old photograph of my parents that is become faded and nearly kind of disappear from the real format. And it's a kind of like, it's a way I reconstruct that kind of memory as a child, in which I think it was the years that I was really happy as a child, and I feel protected, and I feel that there is someone behind my back me up, and there is my family and my parents that I can hold on to. But when we grow up, we don't always have that kind of, you know, place to go back to and hold on to. We have to make our own life and, you know, find out where we can be in this society, find out our own place in this world. And when I make this painting, I'm like attempt to kind of like remind myself that there was that feeling that you can hold back to, and you can be safe and warm. And also, when I was a child, this is a funny thing that my family or my parents, they were like constantly ask me, "Oh, that's one of your best friend. Who's are their parents?" You know, like, what do they do in their life? Instead of like, oh, what kind of people they are they kind people, good people, or mean people? They would just ask, like, what kind of thing they do? Like, are they rich or are they successful? And I just thought, at that time, the other two paintings that I did with the same series was the parents of my galleries, Mickey Meng, which is like Chinese couple live in Texas, in this area actually, and then a parents of Joseph Althusser, which is a designer in they're from like Paris and New York, but they're based in New York now, and it's an image of his parents. And I thought, I just got to know them in that kind of 2020, the years that I got a lot of success, and I just thought, who are our parents, you know, like, and we are three different couples, Asian couple from three different continents. It's just like kind of, I just want to bring this image around and to understand and to feel love as well, that this is the image that was kind of missing in the kind of contemporary art and the figurative that is also like Asian representation in that sense. It was just important for me to do this at that time of my practice. Yeah.
And it also, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that so much of your work stems from very personal autobiographical moments and memories, but then they also connect to, I think, collective memory. And maybe that's the patina of an analog image, and, thinking about the harsh flash that you see in this image that you're reproducing in painting form or restaging a moment from cinema. And so you've talked about, wanting to hold on to this kind of happy memory of your parents.
Yes.
And almost like amplifying the colors from a faded photograph. Because the other image in the painting in this room is Sweet Solitude. So this is a new painting that Jiab made for this exhibition, which both connects to a memory to a film, to an artist that is really important to you, and then also to a moment in your life. Do you want to talk about this painting?
Yes, this painting has been like constructed from the two reference I really like, which is the first one is a painting from Peter Deutsch called Le Paris War. It's a painting that I got to understand about this painting from Deutsch's interview, that he made this painting, and behind that wall it's a cemetery, and he want to make this. He just captured that image and he want to make it like kind of respectful to the family that have, like the family member behind that in that cemetery. And then I realized that I asked myself why I like this image so much. I like to ask myself that because I feel like everything that I like in my life is so collective. There is someone did that before, or is someone showed that to me, or I see that, and by the time I get familiar to it, and then it's become my own taste, which we thought that we have our own taste, but it's actually the taste that built from the collective memories of the other people. And so I asked myself, why you like this image? And I realized that I like this image because it reminded me of a film of Yasujiro Ozu, this is an image. It's called The End of Summer. It's a story that the dad is dying and the whole family gathering together. At the end of the movie, the father of the family really died, and then they're just marching across the river to kind of bury him. And I asked myself, but then why you like this image? And I realized that I like it so much because it reminded me of my own mother's funeral, which is like we had this kind of tradition. It was so hot, and everyone using umbrella, and I thought, oh yeah, that's why all this umbrella thing tickle in my brain. And eventually I was at this view at the Gulf where I live now in Vannes in France. And I really love this scenario in Vannes, in which this is a picture that I captured from 3 different seasons. I will, pass this path just to go to the swim. Like there is a little kind of like corner that we go there to swim nearly daily with my husband. And so I got to realize that I like this corner of the town because it reminds me of those things, and eventually remind me of my own childhood and my own hometown. And it's just funny and interesting that you make your life all the way around the world to go back to the place that remind you of your childhood. And it was a kind of revelation to work on that painting, because when I begin the painting, I didn't realize all about this. And as I said earlier, it's a bit like before I build up the image and to build up the painting, I feel like I am shattered in pieces. I'm breaking in pieces, and then I reconstruct that pieces into the canvas again. And by the time I finish the painting, I feel like I can move on into the next. I kind of have a foundation to move and to walk steadily and groundedly. Yeah.
So, a moment, a memory, an artist that you're looking at, a moment from film, and then the place that you're in, and then the way that you're also constructing the image. I mean, this is just some of the background of how Jiab comes to make any one of her canvases. And so we thought it would be interesting for all of you to see a little bit of the process. So Jiab has generously agreed to share some of these process images that normally you would not get to see, about how she makes her work. And so you can see here, she will take hundreds of photographs, kind of positioning the body just the right way, and then she'll kind of put them together, and you can see that image, the final there, where she's kind of roughly collaged them together to make her figure out her final composition, which she then projects on the canvas and then paints freehand. Yeah. So. Right. So it's also a really 21st century practice that is very also analog at the same time.
Yeah. At the beginning, when 15 years back when I started to work on the painting, I felt really intimidated to use photograph in my practice, because I thought that if you're a real artist, you should draw everything from scratch. And I would spend maybe just 1 month just to draw them, just to outline my painting, and then I would go on like paint, and would take me another further and further time. But then I realized that, what about my background in film then and my love in photography? What is that? Is that art form? Like sometimes it's so intimidated to think of photograph as not as high art form as the other art form. So I thought, like, how can I combine those kind of my little selves that like build up together? Are you gonna abandon yourself that like photograph because you think it's not arty enough? And that's when I get to like kind of feel more and more confidence in putting this kind of like references and use more of film still or like photograph that I use, or even it's not that high quality, but then I can turn it into another kind of layers into my practice, which makes all the sense.
Yeah, and so Jiab didn't study painting, but you did study film. And so you studied cinematography, you worked as a casting director in Bangkok. And so I think this is a really crucial part of Jiab's practice. She's often talked about how painting is almost like filmmaking for her. So she sees paintings as an accumulation of time, as opposed to like the instant of maybe a photograph. So that's why I also think it's important to think about all of these reference points and also all of the images that you're putting together into a single canvas. So in the gallery downstairs, you'll also see references to the community of filmmakers that Jiab, comes out of in Bangkok, and your crew, the postcard from your postcard from Bangkok, for example, or your friend here who's a casting director.
She's a casting director. She's way better than me. She's like she's like how do you say, like the mother god of the casting in Bangkok.
But I love to think of also, Jiab's background as a casting director, and you think about all the way that she's working with people, and she has, yes, people in her lives who become the subjects of her paintings, but it's also, you're working almost like a casting director with your own kind of painting practice, which is so interesting. This is also, for me, was a very revelatory image. Can we take a second to talk about Lonesome Traveler? Because it also connects to this, I think, idea of sweet solitude and also the subjects in your work.
Yeah, certainly you can see from the painting already that, like, you can sense that the man is quite lonely, and he's alone at the cafe, and it's a film still that I took from Eric Romer's, the film that I really like. He's a French director. I saw this film before I moved to France, and what interested me is that I kind of was blown by the fact that when I see the painting, when I see the film itself, when I was younger, when I was just moved to London, I had another perception about the scene, and then when I moved to Brittany and live in Brittany, I see it differently. I take it very personal, and then I realized that, like, it's actually that happen more so and so that things become more and more personal because you start to be too sensitive about things, and you start to, like, I would say, like, stigmatize yourself from your appearance. So to say that I look like Asian, and most of the time I will ask myself, like, why I feel alienated in Europe, because the way people look at me is different, because I don't speak the language in the native way, or because me, myself, that, like, think too much about it. Like, if you go to the cafe alone, are you gonna, like, sit there feeling lonely because you are alone, eating alone at the cafe is not fun, Or is it because you look different? It's like, it's a kind of work that I wanna do to remind myself to really question hard, because you don't want to stigmatize yourself, and at the same time you don't want to take it for granted the way people perceive others, and that if you start to think that way, you are the one who bring it around, the idea of being different. And yeah, I want to tackle on that for my brain, so to make this image is so to instill that idea and to understand totally.
And it's based on solitude. So we have.
Yeah, this is the still frame I took from Eric Romer's. You can see that behind that there was, like, the details of the cafe. And this is the staging technique that I use. That I explain the mood and the feeling and my experience to my best friend Makoto Sakamoto, and he's also my regular sitter. And we talk about our life in Europe, that we've been living in Europe for 15 years, how we actually like to perceive as a local and not foreigner, but then we can't delete the fact that we're from Japan and we're from Thailand, and the way we understand our others in the society is like that. Where you come from, what is your background? So if you come from that, if you come from Texas, you always link with the cowboy hat and cowboy boots, even though you don't like it. You're gonna have to live with it because people gonna link you back to it, even though you don't feel linked to it. So I kind of get to learn to understand this and not to take it personally. And I share that with my sitters, and he sit for me, and we take a photograph, and then I work on the composition on the original still frame that I capture from Eric's Romer film. And then as we mentioned earlier, I project and then work on the kind of element and the tonal in general to make it, translate the feeling I have of being lonely.
And Summer's Tale is actually set in Brittany, which is where you're based now. So there's also a lot of nice resonances there. So we'll come back to this I guess your subjects in a couple more slides about all of the people in your life that you paint over and over again, mostly kind of your everyday friends, family, but there's also part of your work where you I guess your muses are also some of the people that you look up to as an artist. And I was so I think touched by a conversation with Apichatpong when I first saw it, and I'd love it if you could tell the story of how this painting came to be.
Well, conversation with Apichatpong is such an important piece of my life. It's not because I paint Apichatpong, who is famous, but because I feel like I got to be accepted to be in someone's life, that Apichatpong accept to be my sitter and accept me to paint him. And I feel like it's a relationship that you build from scratch, and it's going to last lifelong, because when we talk about Apichatpong, sometimes people will mention about my work, and when I talk about my work, it's about Apichatpong. So at the time when I did this painting, I wasn't even known at all. I was literally no one. I just have, I practice regularly since 14 years at the time. I didn't have any gallery. I didn't have any success, achievement as an artist. But I put my artwork on the website, and I, do that constantly. And I just reach out to Apichatpong and introduce myself and tell him the reason why I want to paint him, because I look up to him, and I feel like because he's exists and being there, someone who constantly practicing his own art, and he arrived and he's achieved to be one of the most celebrated film director in the history of cinema, to my opinion. And so when I look at him, I feel like this is a sort of example of being that you can look up to if you want to become something, want to become someone, do something matters for your life and for others. You have to really make it. And by painting him, I feel like I can get closer to that being and ideas, and maybe learn a lot of things, or one or two things from his sharing, which was really generous. And it was taking place in Lyon, where I used to live. And we just met at the lunchtime. We talked a lot about life, and he was so generous. He was literally he was just asking me questions about my life, why I make my artwork, and why you live in France and everything. I just feel like I was actually asked, I was important once, and I was asked about my life, and it was asked by someone who is so successful, and it was really generous. It was one of important piece in my life in that way.
And now it's really developed into a friendship and a dialogue, which is really special.
Yes.
And there's also references to Apichatpong's work throughout your practice and other paintings. And so I should mention that, one of the other paintings that were commissioned for this exhibition is this portrait of Ocean Vuong. the poet and author. And do you want to talk also about why Ocean was someone that you wanted to connect with and why his work resonated with you?
I discovered like Ocean's work just 2 years ago. Like a photographer came to take my photograph for W magazine, and we talk about my practice. And then during the time that I explained about my artwork, she was like, "Do you know about Ocean Wong? Like he mentioned something very similar to what you feel and your artwork, and the life story that you have." So I look up to him, and then I start to read like "On Earth We Are Gorgeous," and I couldn't stop like looking at his story. I couldn't stop like searching on his story, and I just found that it's so encouraging. It's like he is a perfect example of becoming identity. That's what I call it. Like becoming identity is like no matter what background you're from, even though rich or poor. Like sometimes like it's not only about being poor and have a hard time. Like rich people has hard time to have like kind of a frame of mind that you have to be as successful as your parents or as more rich as there is a lot of complication in our life. So I don't pinpoint that to only people who don't have as much opportunity. But the story of Ocean is really proof that no matter background you have, but if you set your mind to it, you go for it, you arrive to it and you achieve it. And his life and his work, it's such a celebration of life. And I feel like I needed to like portray him to kind of like demonstrate this being and I don't know, maybe like use my painting as a medium for other young artists to look up to this being and say, okay, I can arrive to that day too when I make something matter and I achieve to something I really dream for. And I had a really good opportunity with contemporary Austin help, with Alex, who know the mentor of Ocean, reach out to Ocean, introduce Ocean about my work, very generously from Alex and from the TCA. And I made all the way to his house in Northampton with the support of the museum. And I got such a rich experience that I think I would cherish through my life. And we had that little time, like same as Abhishek Pong, 2 hours, like 1 hour and a half just talking, just to get to know each other, to break that boundaries of being like, you want to know someone who they really are, but not who they want you to think they are. So I think I got to that kind of point where I have that connection with Ocean, and I took this photograph and then I worked from the photograph and in my studio afterward. And this is a picture that I combined from a few different pictures that I took from his place, and then I built on the canvas. Yes.
And then there's also this other reference, which I think is a nice context. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Similar to the Sweet Solitude, I got a realization, like kind of, this one is at the beginning of the painting. When I came back from Ocean's place, I was like, that veranda, wooden veranda fence, wood thing that he has, it just remind me of my grandmother's place. And it looks really like this image because I couldn't have an image of my grandmother's place because they tore that house down. And this is as close as it can get to what scenario I grow up as a child. And in Apichat Pong's family, in Apichat Pong's film, it's repeatedly demonstrate that kind of time and that kind of life, rural life in Thailand that I used to live. And that's why I feel so touched with his work as well, because he brings something very personal and very very Thai into something so universal. Like when you see this image, I don't know for you, but for me, maybe you can confirm me that like this image contain kind of something universal, some wooden fence. It could be in Asia, it could be right here in America, and I just found that there is a link between that two places. Like like the wooden fence in America that bring me back to my grandmother's fence in Nakhon Phanom, which is no more exist. And the first night I worked on Ocean's portrait, I dreamt about that place. and it's a mixed juxtapose of like kind of like the trees in front of Ocean's house, and then the old house that was torn apart. And I felt really lucky, nearly like a trip. And when when I continue to work on the painting, I just feel like that kind of re-merging back or rejoin back between someone you just know and yourself that you know before. And I think that is something really beautiful that I got from the practice that I'm doing with the artwork, with the painting.
And the other day you also told this really beautiful anecdote about being with your great-grandmother when she was on her deathbed, and
Yes.
that she was delirious and speaking in Vietnamese, which was part of your family lineage, but was a language and part of your family history that you didn't have access to.
Yes.
So I think that's also an interesting connection to Ocean's work in terms of also layers of displacement and trauma and access. And so that was also something that really resonated for me in this picture. So I want to take us into the third room of the exhibition, which focuses on the same subject over and over again, Jonga, one of your muses,
Yes.
one of your dear friends, and also you've talked a lot about the importance of elevating your friends for the canvas and returning to them over and over again, and that it's important in terms of representation, but also just the relationships that you have with them, and the kind of this idea of sweet solitude extending to a kind of diasporic family that you've built up for yourself. And I wonder if that's something that we can touch on a little bit as we talk through these. But this is a very important work for you, Night Talk.
This is really important. This is literally the painting that made my career. Otherwise, I was still like working in my little studio in somewhere in Europe and struggle to make the meat ends every month. This painting is really about friendship, and at the time when I work on the painting, I had like identity crash. I feel like I don't know where I belong anymore. I feel like I'm not Asian, but I'm not European. I feel like there is like I'm that in between land. Like I belong nowhere, and I couldn't count myself into. I look back to my family in Thailand. I'm not entirely like them either. I look at some ex-family that I have in Europe. I'm not entirely theirs either. So there is only my friend that live the same experience that I feel like I can count on them and feel like that exists, become the ground for me to stand as a person. And we used to talk about this when I live in Berlin. We were saying that, okay, what we're going to do is that Makoto will make music, and I'm gonna make his record cover. And if he get famous, then I get known. And then if I get famous, he will get known. So that's the kind of thing we joke to each other. Okay, like either of us make it, other one gonna make it too. So when I won the prize and then I become like kind of known and recognized, I thought this is exactly where I can celebrate their being and where I can bring them up, because like everyone looking, when I won the prize, everyone was looking at me, and suddenly I become like an art star. But my friends that was working as hard as me, they're still there, and no one will go and interview them. Oh, how did you make it, Makoto and Jonga? How you make your life in Europe and stuff. So this is the way that I like include my friend into this success, I think, and also to kind of remind myself that I have someone real and someone that know me from before, from my past life, that we can continue the conversation together along the way, and eventually, like at the end of my life, there will be a lot more of their paintings, and then together along the line, my own life, their life, that could be the conversation that we can understand each other life in each stage. Like for example, this painting, like I made it when Jonga just dyed her hair blonde, because our hair turned like white, and she was like, I don't want to look like Korean auntie, I'm gonna go dye my hair and look like Blondie, I was like, go for it. And then she sent me the picture, and I was like, you look fabulous, we must do a painting out of this. And then, so like, I always been thinking about Jonga in the position of Whistler mother, because I think, I don't know much about Whistler mother background, but I felt that there is something stiffness about it. There is something like mother taking care of everything, controlling everything at the same time, works so hard. And the way he perceived his mother is really kind of like, in that sense of flat, but now rigid kind of way, but with a little touch of warmness. And I thought that is an interesting thing about Jonga that I learned as well, the way she became a mother. One year to another, she developed that kind of, character and personality, which I was surprised that it's happening to my kind of like cool dude, school friend, like when you become a mother, you are a mother and you can't help it. And so I asked Nia, which is a daughter of Jonga, to take this picture for me, and I want to perceive the way that like a daughter perceive her own mother, and how I don't know how I can bring this like perception, because I suppose Nia understand that her mother is not just typical mother. She's quite hot, and she looks very cool, and she's this kind of like another kind of mother, new way of being a mother in our time and in our generation. I thought it's important to depict that on a painting.
And I love that it's called Jonga in Nia's Eye. So here's an instance where Jiab art directed, kind of he set up a situation and from afar had the daughter take a photograph of her friend in her Berlin apartment, send the picture back to her, and then she painted from that. Yes. And so it's really interesting to also think about you looking at yourself in the mirror, looking at these film stills, looking at photographs. There's a lot of shifting of perspective that you're pointing to, in all of these images, which I think is, for me, gives me a lot to think about. So here's some process. And then this is a painting that you made for us here for this exhibition last summer, which is also loosely based on this Utagawa woodblock print. And here you can see some process where she's showing Jonga how to pose, and then Jonga is being photographed in her apartment. So
I'm not as good as her, obviously, but I give her a sort of direction.
But I think it's, again, thinking back to that film background that she has, the casting director, the staging. So you have an idea in your mind of exactly what you want to achieve, and you will do this art direction. So sometimes it's a process of interviewing a subject in person and taking multiple photographs, getting to know them through that process like Ocean, and then coming back and making the image. And in other times, there is already a preconceived kind of reference that you're also merging with this personal relationship or experience, which I think is wonderful to see. So also, there's two more images in this room. Girlfriends, which has also these other layers.
Yes, the reference to Ozu.
Ozu. So we have the two Ozu floating weeds in the end of summer.
Yes.
And then also a site that Jiab is very important for her, Belle-et-la-Mer, which is an island off of the coast of Brittany, which is also very important within the history of French painting. So Monet and many other famous 19th century French painters visited this site, and you have been going to this place over and over
first
again.
Time I went there, I thought it was like such a cliche that you go to the kind of place that the French master went there, got so inspired, painted a lot of masterpieces, and then you were like, you're just young artist going there and find something as well. And I was blown by the place by the place because it's really enter you, and it's like it doesn't make you think anymore of like who you are and stuff, and you just like deep into that kind of scenarios around there, and it just enter my work without me. I can't help.
And then here you can see Jiab posing, having her friend pose, and then also just taking photographs and looking at the light and reproducing that. And then finally, the final composition. One of the things you also talked about the other day was that you often are looking to film to light your images. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to say, that's drawing on your own cinematographic background, that you're actually like looking at film lighting, cinema lighting, as a way to figure out the lighting in your paintings.
Yes.
And then Fantastic Night, for me, also really draws on that history of French painting, whether explicit in your process, but you can't help but look at this and think about Nabi, or, for me, I think about the power of the gaze in this instance of how they're making direct eye contact with you and kind of subverting a kind of history of Orientalism within 19th century painting, which for me is just something that I bring to it retroactively, but it's such a kind of charged place and a charged kind of tradition to be, I think, working in. And here we have her dear friends Makoto and Janga again, gathering together on this site on Belle-Île-en-Mer. And then here we have Jiab restaging.
I didn't look cool enough. I was like, Makoto and Janga look too cool. I need to catch up with them. And I just want to tell a little story because when they came, Makoto came with this kind of high waist, wide leg, jeans. And I really love it. So when he left, I bought the same jeans and I kind of I'm going to put it and then make it a little kind of memory of the trip that we had together.
And coming into the final chapters of the exhibition, but I had the opportunity to actually visit with Jiab and Van, which was a very meaningful experience, and it gave me a whole new insight into your everyday life and also the places that appear in your paintings. Mm-hmm. In Still Diptych is actually 2 different places that you lived, and this is also where Guillaume comes into the picture, and your move to France. This is also a sound installation. The painting actually comes with a kind of soundtrack, so when you come into the show, when it's not 700 people in the galleries like last night, you can hear this kind of it almost feels like you're in a film. You kind of hear this kind of the soundtrack
ambient
going.
Sound.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Can we talk a little bit about these windows for you? Because the windows are also like the mirror in a way.
Yes. I just
and the photograph.
When I made that painting, I just moved to Lyon, and
which is on the left, right?
Yeah,
the red roofs is Lyon,
and the right one is where I live right now in Vannes, Brittany, and I felt like before I moved to Lyon, I've been living in so many places, and I have this feeling, I don't know if you ever have that, you feel like when you're leaving something or someplace and you don't grasp that to your heart very carefully, you leave it and then maybe 1 year after, 2 years after, you realize, there is a glitch, there is something coming back, but you don't understand it. What was it that make you feel nostalgic or solitude in that sense? And when I moved, I had that feeling when I moved from Berlin to Lyon. So when I moved from Lyon to Vannes, I told myself that I'm gonna really clean my kind of brain and subconscious. I want to clean it. I want to make sure what matters to me, what is important, what view I had in Lyon that I will cherish all my life. That I took a picture of it, but maybe I would forget about that picture. But then if I paint it, I won't forget it. And so I want to make a link between the window in Lyon and the window in Vannes that I'm living now. There is a transition to it. There is a link to it, and that there is a sense that I'm not neglecting the part of myself, especially if you have so many kind of layers, they call it layer cakes in our life. Like you've been living in different places, live different life, do different job, and you want to make sure that you remember all of them and you don't neglect them.
And I have a sentimental attachment to this one because I lived in Lyon once upon a time, and I used to look out at a window at Vieux Lyon and see all the red roofs coming up. So this reminds me of a photograph that I have
with the smell of the croissant in the morning. Yeah.
Exactly. And then Guillaume.
Yeah.
So now another very important figure in your world of muses.
Yeah, Guillaume is my husband. And I just think it's interesting that I paint a lot about Asian people, my Asian friend that is in Europe. But in my personal life, I live in the European, so there is this side of the part of the being that is linked back to Asia by my friends. But at home, where I nurture myself daily is based on being French. And I thought it's interesting to look at my partner, the way that I conceive him, how I conceive myself. And they say that in a couple, you are the mirror to each other. You eventually mimicking each other. And I thought like looking at my husband also make me understand about myself, about my life. And I feel like it's not violent, but it's quite strong in a way that like he appear amongst the other like Asian figure, and that makes him like, you know, that differentiate him in a sense as a representation. And that's what I think in our couple, like mixed couple life, is like someone is always left behind being lonely because you never reintegrate into other culture that as much. I would probably integrate more in French society because I live in France, but then Guillaume will always be a stranger inside, you know, inside my peers, like amongst my Thai people. He will always be a stranger. So I think it's interesting in that way that what I felt is actually repeated in the other. So it's not only that because you are a foreigner outside of your country that you feel excluded or you feel strange, you feel alienated. That happens to people who share the life with those that is not from the place as well. So I want to look, you know, I want to kind of make sure I look in every kind of perspective and not to stigmatize myself. And that's the way I think it's the way I clean my conscience and become a good person in the society, because I want to be a good person where I live, and I want to give good energy to people. And by giving good energy, you really need to understand about yourself totally. So when I go out on the street, however people treat me, if they treat me right or wrong in France, I can understand them. I can understand myself, and this is, I think, important. And in a way, I practice my artwork, and in the way I practice my own life in a way.
Oh, so we did get to go, so I thought it'd be fun for you to see a little behind the scenes here in the studio. There's Guillaume. And we're going to move into the final chapter of the show, but we're going to cruise through a little bit of some of the scenes from Jiab's studio. And one of the things I think is really wonderful in the exhibition is that, so you're seeing examples from the past 5 years of Jiab's practice. So even though she's been painting for 20, this is really focused on from the kind of the prize on, or Apichatpong on. And you can really see a shift in some of the language that you're using as a painter. And now that you live in Brittany, you've really moved into representations of landscape. And when Jiab and I first started talking about the show and what she has found compelling about the land, is you talked a lot about mapping on previous experiences in the places that you are, that you get to know the place you're in by thinking about where you've been. And so you talked a lot about the waterways in Van connecting to your childhood growing up near the Mekong River in Thailand. And so can you tell us a little bit about, as we kind of take the last few minutes to talk through these new works, why you shifted into landscape, some of the things you're thinking about, what it's done for you, and also there is still a connection to cinema here with some of the techniques, specifically Music of Silence, which I think is just such an incredible new work, and it was just stunning to see it in process in the studio and see it completed here in Austin.
Yeah, when I moved to Van and live in Brittany, I thought, I'm curious how the place gonna enter me, because it's so it's happened so that a lot of artists in France in the Impressionism era, they would go to this kind of area in Brittany or Normandy and get so inspired by the color, and the plein air kind of painting is actually happening there, because the color of things and the lighting change during the day. You can see the blue flickering light on the tip of the trees, or rose colors suddenly happen and disappear very quickly. And it's I never experienced acid, but probably it's really like that. And I was like, should I experience acid? But maybe not. Maybe the nature can just give me that experience already. So I make when I make a painting, when I make this painting in this last room, which is focused so much on the nature, I felt like I don't know, I'm searching for freedom in my practice, and nature kind of lead the way, because I feel like, yeah, if I'm continuing the kind of like portraiture, I feel like I'm refining and refining, but it's important for me to kind of find the contra energy, let's say contra pose, like when you do yoga, to kind of recounter yourself, not to be too confident in one medium, in which already so specific, which is acrylic. And I feel like I want to capture that feeling I have since I moved to Brittany. It's like continue from the other painting we talk about, that I want to make sure I clean my subconscious, that I know what matters to me, what is meaningful to me, and why not doing it right here, right now, before you leave it. Like when you are leaving it, still living it, appreciating it, just, take a shot of it and paint it. So that's what I did. And I explore a lot on this kind of, because it gives me the freedom, nature, so I explore a lot on the method I learned in the film school, which is like when you want to do night scene, you can take a picture or take a video of the nighttime and then dim it down and make it a nighttime, like shift from day to night. So yeah, you can see in the picture here that I take a picture of the view in the daytime, and then I turn and interpret it from my own experience and kind of my little details of, like nature as it like, into that little reference, and then build on the canvas and interpret it the way that I like it.
Right. So the day for night technique is used over again in Jiab's work.
Yeah.
And also I should mention that in Brittany it's just you and Guillaume too. So there's also maybe a difference of these spaces that the two of you kind of share, very like almost alone together. And then there's, and they have really kind of blossomed into this kind of free space. And they have a very different characteristic. Swimming is a huge part of your world.
I love swim. I'm not a good swimmer, but I really love to swim, because I grew up in Nakhon Phanom at the Mekong River, and there was a myth about like the Naka, the big dragon that like make people disappear. So you're not allowed to swim in the river, and I don't know how to swim until I moved to Europe. I learned to swim when I was 30. So every time I went into the water and swim and float, I feel so blessed. And I feel like I'm lucky to learn this even later in my life. And so that's why water and swimming is such a big, important part for my life.
And this one is, we've made a beautiful beach blanket, which I saw you took to Big Stacy the other day.
Yeah, I took it to Big Stacy, taking a picture.
So Jiab has spent a lot of time swimming here and exploring the waterways.
Yes.
And here we have Guillaume again by the water. Another new painting for this exhibition.
Yes.
And then just to say, so when after Jiab did her visit with Ocean, we brought her to Austin several months ago to explore the water here and to learn about the place where her exhibition would be. And given her kind of recounting of thinking about the waterways as a way to connect her own place and sense of being, we invited her to think about Austin. And so Jiab and Guillaume came, and they went to a lot of swimming holes, and they took them on.
I went to a lot of swimming holes indeed.
And then this is your gift to Austin.
Yes, this is my I would say Austin moment. I was there by a mistake, because we tried to find a way to Barton Spring, and we got into this part that like a lot of young people, they're just gathering down a little creek down there that you can go down, and they're just talking with bikes, and just feel like it just feel like, in French we say like la vie passée. It's like when the life is really happening, you didn't mean it, you didn't mean to see this kind of, you didn't mean to have this feeling, but then you arrived to that place and the water was shining, the sun was like beating, but you're in the shade, you feel good, and you feel like life is good. And I have that moment at that place. And at first I thought I'm going to do something a little more ambitious, like a little kind of like a lot of layers of like things that I see in Austin. But then I thought like I would just stay true to what I felt really good about, and just portray this view and this emerald water that I pass and see, and kind of like also the feeling I have from the holistic water that I've been swimming with Alex around Austin. Like the mineral that you feel in your water is like rejuvenated, and I felt that, and I wanna capture that feeling into that like emerald color.
I think that's a wonderful place for us to conclude, especially on this beautiful day.